What's up, guys? It's Mr. Bringle, and today we're going to be going over the Recognizing Forces Concept Builder from PhysicsClassroom.com. So we're going to start off here with the apprentice level, and what this is going to do is it's going to give us a situation, in this case, a baseball traveling upward and rightward through the air. We are tasked with identifying all of the forces that are acting on the baseball. And the forces will be the same each time. Normal force, which remember is a contact force, it's always going to extend perpendicular to the surface of contact. So in this case, the baseball is not in contact with any sort of surface. So normal force will not be a part of this. Then we have gravity, which of course gravity is going to be acting on everything. And so we'll choose that one. An applied force is going to be a push or a pull, typically from, in these situations, typically from a human, like pushing a box or pulling a rope or that's attached to a sled or something like that. So we'll need to be careful with differentiating between applied forces and tension when there's a rope involved. It depends on what the force diagram is focusing on. So in this one, yes, the baseball had an applied force on it initially, whether it was somebody throwing the ball or a baseball bat that hit the ball. But this says that the ball is in the air, so there's no one actively pushing or pulling on the baseball, so we will not choose applied force. Friction is going to be referring to friction between two surfaces. So the object needs to be sliding or rubbing against something. In this case, the baseball is not. Tension is going to be present in like a rope or a chain or a cord, which is not present here. And then, of course, air resistance. In this concept builder, any object that is moving will have air resistance on it. I know a lot of problems will tell you to neglect air resistance, so you'll want to be careful about making sure to choose that. So on this one, the only two forces acting on the baseball would be gravity, which is constantly pushing down on the baseball, and then air resistance, which is more or less friction in the air, type of fluid friction. Okay, we'll move a little bit faster since we've gone over the different types. So this says a bucket of water is attached to a rope. It's being pulled upward out of a well. So obviously gravity will be acting on this one. There's no normal force because the bucket is not sitting on anything. A lot of people will be tempted to put applied force because the bucket is being pulled out of the well, but the person is pulling on the rope. So there's an applied force on the rope, but it's actually the tension within the rope that pulls up on the bucket. So instead of applied force, we're going to choose tension. There's no friction, but there is air resistance. So this is when it rubs against the surface. This is when it moves through the air. Okay, so a person stands at rest on the floor. So obviously gravity will be acting on the person, and then since they are in contact with the floor and the floor must push back up on the person, there will be a normal force acting on the person. There's no applied force, no push or pull, no friction because they're not moving, sliding, scuffing their feet on the ground. There's no tension because there's no rope or cord, and there's no air resistance because the person is not moving. Alrighty, a skydiver is falling towards the ground at a constant speed. So we know that gravity is acting on the person. There will not be a normal force because the person's not in contact with anything. There's no applied force because no one is actively pushing or pulling on the skydiver. No friction because not rubbing against a surface. No tension because there's no rope. There is air resistance. And that would be the only way for the person to move at a constant speed. If air resistance was not present and it was just gravity, the person would speed up perpetually. All right, team of landscapers pull an unplanted tree across the lawn. So there's always going to be gravity acting on, we're identifying the forces on the tree. The tree is sitting on the ground, so there's going to be a normal force that pushes back up against it. It does say that the landscapers pull the tree, so there's an applied force. It doesn't mention a rope or anything like that. The tree obviously is going to rub against the ground, so there's going to be friction, and then there's also air resistance because the tree is moving through the air. And we've done it. Okay. So we'll go through the master level, and then the wizard level is actually just a combination of apprentice and master, so I'll let you guys do that one on your own. A trapeze artist is swinging from a rope that is attached to the ceiling. So we're looking at the trapeze artist here. So obviously gravity acts on the trapeze artist. There's no normal force because the person is not, standing on some surface pushing up. There's no applied force because nobody actively pushing or pulling. No friction because not rubbing against a surface. There is tension because they're hanging from a rope. And there is air resistance because they're moving through the air. Okay. A child pulls a sled by a rope across the lawn at a constant speed. So there's always going to be gravity. We're looking at the force diagram for the sled. The sled is sitting on the ground with the ground pushing back up on it, so that'll be the normal force. It does say that the child pulls the sled by a rope. So we're not going to choose applied force. We are going to choose tension instead. And then, of course, we're going to choose friction and air resistance because the sled is rubbing across the ground and also moving through the air. Okay, a sledder is moving to the right across unpacked snow and skidding to a stop. We're looking at the sledder here. So gravity is acting on the person, and they are supported by the ground. So there's a normal force. There's no applied force because no push or pull. There's no tension because no rope here. There is friction because it says they're skidding to a stop on unpacked snow. And then there is air resistance because they're moving through the air. Okay. A moving shuffleboard disc skids to a stop across an asphalt surface. Identify the forces on the disc. So gravity acts on the disc. There's a normal force supporting the puck so that it does not fall through the ground. There's no applied force because nobody's actively pushing or pulling it. There's no tension because there's no rope. There is friction and there is air resistance. So this is very similar to the sled skidding to a stop. All right, a large crate is at rest on a ramp at a loading dock. Okay, so gravity is pushing down on the crate. The crate is supported by the loading dock, which is the normal force. Nobody is actively pushing or pulling, so no applied force. There's no rope or cord involved, so no tension. The tricky one here is that there is friction. So if the box was sitting on a level surface and it was not on a ramp, so it's just flat, then you would not choose friction. But for the box is on a ramp, and the only reason it doesn't slide down the ramp is because there's enough friction to hold it in place. So you have to choose friction here, but we will not choose air resistance because it is not moving. Okay. All right. So there's your apprentice and master level completed. You will need to do the wizard level on your own, and make sure to let me know if you have any questions.